All right, last time we started talking about single table queries. So we'll do a quick review of that and then we'll carry on from there. First learned about the basic query. This one I type it all the time. Give me everything in that table. Every single field, every single record. Often you need that that kind of information. It's a quick command, that's what's convenient about it. But in many other cases, circumstances, you don't want a complete field list. Maybe your table's got 15 fields. You only want 2 or 3 of them, 3 or 4 of them, 1 of them. You can designate, replace the star with the fields separated by commas, and you can create any list of fields that you want in any order that you want. We'll see probably today that you can even create new fields called calculated fields in there. You can duplicate fields if you need them twice for some goofy reason. Maybe it's a really wide listing and you want to have the union member on the left and the union member on the right. Not a problem. Once you designated which fields you want, then one of the most common things you'll do is designate which records you want. As your databases grow, your tables will have thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of records. You're not going to want to see them all. Which ones do you want to see? In SQL, that's a where clause. So after the from clause, where you designate your table name, you designate the where clause. The where clause helps you filter the data to see only the records that you want to see. Designate a where clause where you typically designate a field name and then some kind of a relational operator, just like in programming. A relational operator equal to, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, etc. And the values that you want. Equal to is pretty common. You have to include the equal to. You can't just say Chicago. Say city equals Chicago or destination equals Chicago. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. There's a between and operator that simplifies doing a between criteria. It's very common. I want all the numbers between 10 and 25. So we could say where the value is between 10 space and space 25. But remember that the 10 and the 25 are included in that. When you use a between operator, the endpoints are included. In C#, you can't do that, right? There's no between in C#. In C#, you have to say, give me all the numbers that are greater than or equal to 10 and less than or equal to 25. So that's its counterpart. And you can do that here too, because remember you can use and, so we could do it either way. And I think one of the assignment questions actually has you do it both ways to prove that you can. Whenever we're comparing text, we have to put apostrophes or quotation marks around it. When you're doing dates, put apostrophes around it. Remember, dates are always specified in year, month, day format, usually with a dash because it's easier to read. If you use that format, you have book quotes around it or apostrophes. If you wish, you can also enter dates in a smushed format with no dashes. You don't need the quotes there. So it's a little simpler. I think MySQL provides that opportunity for you because there's a lot of programs out there that store dates in that kind of an 8-digit format to keep it very small. But from our perspective, I think it's a lot easier to read when there's dashes. There are compound conditional operators just like there are in C#. You can use the AND operator, the OR operator. You can also use the C# versions of those. Perfectly acceptable. Again, I think that's a modification that SQL has added lately because so many of the curly bracket languages are out there. They make it a little easier for the people in those languages to adapt to SQL. If you have a Boolean field, also called a bit field, those are stored in the databases as zeros and ones. Where 1 is true and 0 is false. So you could say if is married equals 1. You can also say if married equals true. But more likely, the best way, the most transportable way to say full-time, let's use the example that's in my notes, is to simply say where full-time. That field has a 0 or a 1 in it. A 1 represents true. So what this basically says is give me a list of students where the full-time field has a 1 in it. It's true. You can say double equals single equals 1 equals true, but this is easy to read. And it's a little more portable because Access stores its trues as -1. So if you import an Access database into MySQL, you'll get -1s instead of 1s. And if you do an equals 1 or even an equals true, I think still works, but the equals 1 does not. So this is the best way, I think, to check the value of a Boolean field. If you want to check the reverse, you can say full-time equals true, or you can say where not full-time. Again, very readable and easy to type. As you gain more and more experience as programmers, you'll do that automatically. Stop putting the double equals true, the double equals false, just use nots and Boolean variables. We also took a look at the in operator. The in operator allows us to provide a list. For the purposes of this class, your list must have at least 2 items in it. It is perfectly legal to say where the color is in red. But why would I say color in red instead of color equals red? So if you're only comparing against one value, use an equal sign. But if you want to check to see if your field contains one of multiple values, then the in operator is proper. To use the in operator, where color in and the parentheses around the entire list, each one of the items in the list separated by commas. Apostrophes around text and dates, otherwise numbers, just type them in. Finally, we talked about the like operator. The like operator allows you to do a comparison using wildcards. In SQL, the wildcard character is a %sign. We can use that % as a anything. So here's a bunch of examples where the name is like, and again the quotes because it's text. DAV, Davis, Davison, Dave, and even DAV is matched to that because the % not only represents any set of characters, but that includes no characters. So this where clause will match DAV. This is the equivalent of starts with. Many programming languages have string operator or string functions, starts with, ends with, contains. This is the SQL version of starts with. Because the D and the A and the V have to be at the beginning. What comes at the end doesn't matter. Here's the SQL version of ends with, percents at the beginning. I don't care what it starts with, but it must end with the letters SON in that sequence. And again, SON all by itself will match that criteria. And finally, this is the version that is contains. I don't care what it starts with, I don't care what it ends with, as long as it's got an SON in it anywhere. Very common misperception is that means the SON has to be in the middle. Not true, because the % signs could be matching nothing. If they're both nothing, this will match sun. It will match Anderson. It'll match sunbonnet. I don't know where that came. No. Sonnet. There we go. It'll match sonnet. Anything that starts with SON, it'll match as well. So this is the most commonly used one because it matches, just doesn't matter where the SON appears. You can't put them in the middle. It's a little less common. And there is also a second wildcard character, which is an underscore. I haven't used this one much. The underscore represents one and only one character. This will, here's an example, like T underscore M. That'll do Tam and Tom and Tim and Tom and T2M. But it will not match TM. It will match T space M. It'll match that, because space is a character, but not just TM. Are like. We talked about regular expressions at all. I'm trying to remember who I've talked with on these things. Steve's going, doesn't sound familiar to me. So I'm not surprised. It's a very, I don't know if it's very, but it's a pretty complicated concept. that allows you to create patterns. Regular expressions are kind of an advanced technique for validation. It's available in all languages, including SQL, and it has its own syntax. Regular expressions is a unit in web programming. It's a whole chapter. So we got to learn all the rules. And then once you've learned all the rules, it's just like programming. Now put the rules together in hundreds, thousands, millions of different ways to solve different pattern problems. This pattern is goofy. I'll explain it to you briefly, and then we're going to skip right over this. I'm not going to demonstrate it. There's no need for it in the homework assignment. I just want to mention this is here for me again. How do I do regular expressions in SQL? This is the chapter that I would go to. So it's mostly for me. It's a little advanced for what we need here, so I'm going to skip past it and introduce you just that very brief concept of regular expressions, and then you'll see it again next fall. A regular expression asks, does the customer name match this pattern? That's what that's saying. Are-like. Regular expression like. Okay. This doesn't say it starts with a caret, then it has a square bracket, and then it has an A, then it has an F and a W, and that's not what it says. The caret here means that whatever happens has to become, that means at the beginning of the string is what that means. And the dollar sign at the end means here's the end of the string. Then the square brackets mean any one of these letters. I'm going to ask Green to help me since he's sitting in the room. What's the star? Is it 1 or more? Or is it 0? I think plus is 1 or more. But every one of these letters, a lot of these characters, do you remember? I'm sorry. So the star might be 0 or more. Okay. But the square brackets mean pick one. Any one of these. If the customer name starts with the letter A, F, or W, followed by any character, any letters. 0, a dot is any letter, I believe, or any character. It might be any letter. And then any number of those any letters. So that's nice and clear, right? Really easy to understand. And write is even worse, putting them together to come up with these patterns. What this basically says is give me a list of all the customers who start with, whose last name or whose name start with A, F, or W. Because the first letter at the beginning of the string has to be an A, an F, or a W, followed by any combination of letters, numbers, digits, dashes, and 0 or more of them. Whew. And this is an easy one. There are regular expressions that define what a URL, a web address, has to look like. It has to contain these components. There are URLs that describe dates and how they could be formatted. There are all kinds of, not URL, regular expressions. There are regular expressions out there that describe just about anything you can dream up. Phone numbers with parentheses. There has to be a parenthesis at the beginning, and then 3 digits only. That can be done in regular expressions, followed by another parenthesis, followed by a space, followed by 3 more digits. On and on and on. They can be very handy for validation, especially if the validation is complicated. Because imagine trying with your skill set that you have, at least today, validating a phone number to make sure it's accurate. That the parentheses are all in the right place, and that there's a space after the parenthesis, and there's a dash after the 3rd digit after the first closing parenthesis. Can be done, but not easily. Using regular expressions, we can define, we probably look up a regular expression for a phone number with area code in parentheses, and when one statement say, if the phone number matches this pattern, then accept it, otherwise throw a fit and say that's not a real phone number. One statement. That's the power. So congratulations, you've been regular expressioned. You've been introduced to it. Again, there's a whole unit on it halfway through web data or web programming next semester, and that's where you'll get some of the details. Except for Karen, who's going to look it up when she gets home. If we want to check for an empty box, remember in programming in C#, null is not the same thing as an empty string. It's not the same thing as 0. How many items do we have in stock? 0 means we don't have any items in stock. Null means we don't know. We don't have a value. It's unknown. It's missing. Same thing in databases. And so if you want to check to see if a field is missing, like middle initial or maiden name, then you check for is null. Hint, hint, it's in the recording. This does not work. And it's not a syntax error because it's not an equivalency thing. It's not equal to null. Nothing is equal to null, or everything is equal to null, I forget. That does not work. You'll write it, you'll run your query, you may even get an answer, but it'll be wrong. So be very careful when you're checking to see if a field is missing. So in my database, where do I have missing stuff and employees? I don't think I have any. Yes, no, trip dates. Gender, plant, phone, hire date. Well, let's just do a quick search. But I have to pick a field. I can't just say salary, number. Select star from TBL employees. This is what it would look like, where the phone number is null. That says where there isn't a phone number. Again, it's different than an empty string. I'm going to be showing you in programming logic beginning or intermediate here real quick how to make sure that when data is missing, you actually store null in the database because it's much more efficiently stored than the empty string. The empty string is a string. And it has all this string overhead stuff, whatever that is, takes up space. Null doesn't take up any space. 0 is an integer, takes up space. Null doesn't take up any space. So in our database, if the data is missing, we want to put null out there. So let's see if I get anything here. Probably not. Nope, nobody is missing a phone number. Anybody not yet been assigned to a plant? Nope. What else might be blank? Genders, last names, first names, I doubt it. Employee IDs, I don't think so. Pardon me? I don't have a supervisor ID in here, but yeah, you're right. It could be, but plant ID, we've got a new employee. We haven't decided where he or she is going to be assigned yet, potentially. Just take a quick look. And by the way, this is how null appears in the database. And we'll do a little bit of looking around, a little bit of inserting later. If you insert an empty string, you'll see nothing here for the phone number. That's different than null. There's one. Okay, so give me a list of trips where the duration is null. Where, please? Still not happy. Okay. There. So I have 1, 2, 3 trips that if it weren't designated 2010, my suspicion would be these people are still gone. Okay. How do I, or they're back and they haven't submitted their travel requests, or they're back, they've submitted their travel requests and we haven't entered it into the system yet, whatever. But that means that information is not yet available to us. Let's see what happens. Notice there's 3 records. Let's see what happens if we say equals null. No red squiggles. Oops, wrong one. No red squiggles. And your first thought would, good, everybody's back from our trips. But notice you got the wrong answer. But what's bizarre to me is that you don't get a syntax error. To me, that's a syntax error. But that's not how it works in MySQL. So be very careful when you do the query, when you do the assignments, be very careful that when they say, give me a list of records where this field is null, that you say is null, and not equals null. There's also is not null. So that would remove all the nulls. That's sometimes common if you're doing statistics, doing math. Don't do this math in records where one of the values that I'm doing math with is null, because the answer is always null. Null is kind of like a black hole. When you do math with it, the answer is always null. It just sucks up everything else and becomes null. The exception to that are the statistical functions, min, max, average, sum. Remember those in Excel? They ignore nulls. They do not include them. So when you're calculating an average, nulls are not included. But that's also good to know, because those are records that have been skipped. So null has its little bad sides. We're going to be careful. Questions on null? Many times when you run queries, particularly if the query has a limited field set, as in 2 or 3 fields out of 20. Many times when you do a result set with that, you'll get overlap. You get the same answer twice. I think there's one in your homework assignment. So give me a list of all the orders that include irons or wood stoves or whatever it is. Well, maybe somebody or 2 or 3 people came in and ordered an iron and a wood stove at the same time. And so they show up on the order, but they show up twice, because they show up once because it's an iron, and then again because it's a wood stove. And so they show up in your answer set twice, and you really don't want that. What the distinct clause allows you to do is designate that if there's any duplicates, remove them and just show me one copy. So here's an example. Select the major from the enrollment table of everybody who's enrolled in, I think that's RDD. I don't know what that number is. If I went through this class and said, what are your majors? How many would I get? 1, 2, 3 maybe? But what I don't want to see is software developer, software developer, software developer, software developer. What are the different majors in this class is what I'm asking. If we run this query, I will get software developer 20 times. If I add the keyword distinct, the parentheses are optional. If I add the keyword distinct, I will get software developer once. Network specialist once. Business management once. And it cleans up the result set. As an example, and we don't have very many good ones here, but let's say that I want a list of the plant IDs. Where does everybody work? What are the ID numbers? Couldn't I go to the plant table and figure that out? Maybe. But again, let's extrapolate, make this problem bigger, and think skyward with thousands of tables. And you're looking at one and you want to know what values occur in this field. I actually have a better example. Yep, there it is. Generate a list of destinations that we've traveled to. Select destination from TBL trips. Okay, let's order those, because otherwise Val's going to get mad at me again. Order by destination. And now again, if this was 3,000 trips, I guess I could scroll through this and see, okay, there's a lot of Atlanta, there's a lot of Chicago. No. Let's just do this. Where have we traveled to this month or whatever? And there's my list. So it's taking all the duplicates out. That's what distinct does. My advice to you for the homework assignment, because you have an anal instructor, I don't think you should use distinct if you don't need it. And there's a couple of circumstances where some of you are going to use it. You don't need it because you already had distinct, because there were other clauses that cause distinct. Putting it in there extra is redundant. My advice, don't put it in there. And when you find out you get duplicate answers, then add it real quick. You saw how hard it was. So for the homework assignment, don't put it in right away. You're going, oh, this is a distinct, because it says only have the values appear once. That book author, he's tricky. He puts that in there even when you don't have to worry about it. So try it without. If you get a distinct list, go with it. There are other clauses that we're going to learn about that cause a distinct to happen automatically. Generate a list of destinations and each employee to traveled. Who went there? You can add more fields. And this says sort by city and then by employee. Now I'm going to take the distinct out temporarily. Sort by destination and employee ID. So here's Atlanta. Oh, look, this person has been to Atlanta twice. Well, being an ex-Air Force officer, I did a lot of travel, and I went to New Jersey. Joined the Air Force, see the Midwest or the East Coast. I went to New Jersey a lot. And if I just want to see who's been where, because we're sending somebody new to New Jersey, who's been there? That wasn't a question. Okay. But anyways, just add the distinct. Now it removes the duplicates. Those should go. There's a couple. This person's been to Atlanta a couple times. Doesn't matter how many times. If you add the distinct clause, it says, take a look at this combination now and give me all the distinct values. So I'm not going to get one copy of Atlanta. I'm going to get one copy of every Atlanta employee combination. Notice the 188 duplicate is gone for Atlanta. So distinct is pretty powerful, very convenient if you're getting duplicate results because the field list is small. Obviously, those people went on different days. If I add the date to this, who goes to the same city twice in the same day? There, distinct doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you're getting duplicates and you don't want them, easy to remove. My notes mention that there are 232 rows returned here out of 300. There are 300 trips in the database. So that means it's 68 of these, 68 of these are duplicates. People who've been to the same city more than once. And this is just in the month of February. So remember, right, all these months are February. But this is the kind of stuff that SQL allows you to do. Come up with these seemingly bizarre questions and get answers. This morning I was given a tour of Merton Machining, stuff a Highway J. And the owner there was telling me about how they're using SharePoint and Oracle databases, and everything that ever happens in that place gets stuffed into a database. We got new parts, we got new materials delivered. SKU code on them, they scan them into the database. When did they arrive? What did it weigh? What was it? All that kind of stuff. And then they cut it into chunks. Each one of the chunks gets its own into the database. Then we use this drill bit to put a hole in this thing, and we used it for 15 minutes into the database. The drill bit is marked into the database. Can you imagine the kind of data they got there and how much? One of the things they're struggling with is data overload. We got all this data, and we're storing it, but we don't know how to get it out of there. We don't know how to then analyze it. New field software developers, business intelligence, business analysis, basically data analysis. I got reams and reams and reams and terabytes of data. I don't even know what's in there. There's information in there, right? There's got to be. That drill bit over there, you've been using it for 4 hours. It's going to snap on you and ruin that part and maybe fly out and hit the operator if we're not careful. How do we use that data? How do we get that out of there? Here's your introduction to that. A lot of demand for it right now. Everywhere. By the way, the other thing I learned this morning talking to Merton Machining is that there are a lot of small companies like them that do not want a software developer. They want a software developer who can also learn the skills of a business analyst, who can also learn a little bit of data warehousing, who can maybe even install some software in a couple of pieces, and if need be, give a tour. That's small companies. But for some people, that might be a good fit for you. It never occurred to me. I want to send all of you skyward. Be software developers 45 hours a week, 50 weeks out of the year. Maybe not. That isn't necessarily where your career path is going. Maybe you're going to be the Jack or Jill of all trades, and how do I train you for that? They had an easy answer for that, so you don't. You give them one skill, you send them to us, we'll do the rest. Internships. I had a business management major in there figuring out the best way to wrap their parts in a vacuum environment. Shouldn't they have a vacuum manufacturing engineering guy doing that? No. So, data extraction, we're starting to get the idea. I hope you're starting to get the idea. But when they have that information, they want to know what's in my database. SQL allows you to ask any question you want as long as the data's there and get it out. That's what we're learning here. Very valuable skill. Here's another example. How many different courses are we offering in spring of 2002? I think it's time to no, I'm not going to update those notes. But anyway, how many did we offer in spring of 2002? Right. That's basically what this is question. How many? It doesn't say give me a list. Notice there's a new function here that you haven't seen before, count. And we'll see it. We'll talk about it in more detail here in just a second. But count mixed with distinct. Because there are probably 3-4 sections of programming logic beginning, intermediate, in spring of 2002. It's not what I want to know. My administrator wants to know how many different courses did we offer in that semester. So this says, give me a list of distinct courses in spring of 2002. And then count how many elements are. All count does is how many rows did you get? Kind of like that little guy down here at the bottom. If I wanted to know how many distinct combinations of these things do we have, I could say count. I don't know if I can do that with a combination. How do I do that? I'd have to concatenate. Let's save that. I was thinking in this one I have 2 fields, so it's hard to count. But if I wanted to go back to the destination, how many cities were there? Remember? 8, 9, 7? Who cares? Well, somebody does. They want to know how many there were. All right. So I create a distinct list of them and then count. If all I want to know is a number, there's the number, 10. Now, knowing most administrators, the next question is going to be, which ones were they? Well, why don't I just generate you a list of which ones they are and then you can count them? Well, what if there's 175? I don't want to count those manually. There's 10 here. Okay, I could have done that. So we have that ability as well. We have all kinds of ability here. And it's starting to look a little bit like programming, isn't it? You take all these tools and put them together in just the right way. Last time we also talked quickly about sorting, because it doesn't take long. You add an order by clause like I did here, order by hire date. Like I did, here it is, order by destination, which makes absolutely no sense when I'm counting, right? But I'm anticipating my boss's next question. And you'd be amazed how impressed they are because you can take stuff out and give them the answer they want. That was quick. Oh, yeah. And they're sorted already. Order by is all you have to do. Put in the order by clause. The order by clause must follow the where clause. You have to put the where clause in first. Syntax of SQL. The order of the clauses is important. You always start with select, then from, then where, then order by. We got a couple more coming yet. The sequence of those has to match. You cannot put an order by clause first and then a where clause. Not yet. Seems to me that's something they could add to MySQL. Who cares what order the clauses are in? Maybe they do know why. We can sort by multiple fields. If there's a tie, break the tie. We can sort in reverse order using the keyword DESC. You cannot use descending. It is DESC. And no, you don't put the square brackets in. In my notes, the square brackets mean optional. You don't have to say descending. You don't have to say ascending. There is an ASC as well. I never use it. Square brackets are around comma field 2. You don't have to have a second field, but you can add as many fields to your sort as you need. A bunch of examples. Pretty straightforward. We can sort by anything. Booleans, dates, text, numbers. Whatever you need to sort by. Questions? When we talked about database design, one of the steps in database design was remove the calculated fields. Because we can calculate them, so let's not take up storage space. Now again, remember, in today's world, storage is cheap, processing power is unbelievable. So some of those rules are starting to be broken a whole lot more than they used to be. The problem with storing calculated values is you do have to write code to say, I need to update that. Because we don't want the human doing the math for us. So if we do store calculated fields in a database, we have to remember to update those fields. I still lean toward, I don't want to store them. I've got unbelievable amounts of processing power. Whenever I need to, I'll calculate. You want to know what your GPA is? Just ask. In 100 billionths of a second, I'll give you the answer. If you don't want to wait that long, then write it down. It doesn't take long. To build calculated fields, all we really need to do is put the formula in the field list. All. Of course, you need to know the formula. Some things like calculating GPAs, the formula is fairly complex. Might not fit there. You might have to use some more advanced SQL techniques to actually do the calculations first and then plug them in here. But if they're fairly simple calculations, you can put them right into the field list. So here I'm calculating my cost, or my tax, excuse me. Take the installation cost, or whatever that is, installation cost, and multiply by 0.055, and that'll give me the tax for that. I don't need to store the tax. There are all kinds of built-in mathematical operators, just like in C. You can do sums and averages and standard deviations and square roots, and you name it, it's probably there. I'll leave most of that research to you if you need it. You won't for the homework assignment. But if you need some advanced processing, some trigonometry functions, they're there. Go check out the MySQL resource and just do a quick search for sine, and you'll have it. It's all there if you need it. This is also an interesting combination. Notice what it says, select star from TBL install. So give me all the fields that were normally in there, and then also give me this calculated field. Okay, so up here it says calculate the cost per day for every trip. So let's do some examples. What else do I want to know? Let's get the trip date in there, and just so that we can check, let's put the destination, it doesn't matter much. But the cost per day would be how many days, so that's the duration. And is it expenses? I forget what the column is. Expenses. So I'm going to put expenses first, then the duration. Those are just regular fields. I just want, that stuff's in the table. I want to see that too. But in addition to that, I want the cost per day. To calculate the cost per day, you take the total of the expenses for that trip, divide by the duration. And that's now going to be one of the fields. So you can mix and match, and you will. Mix and match calculated fields with regular fields. You can put the calculated field in here, all kinds of stuff. And there's my expenses slash duration. What the heck is that? It puts the actual equation in there. And imagine now if you have this big, huge, ugly monster equation, 17 sets of parentheses, that's what gets used for the field heading. That's not good. So how do I fix that? Create an alias. An alias is just another name for something. So I'm going to create an alias for my calculated field. For calculated fields, you almost always create an alias. So I'll call this cost per day. you can create an alias for any field. So if I'm sick of destination, I can say, okay, for this report, you are called city. Simply use the keyword as after the original, and it will rename it in your output only. That does not rename the field in the database. It only renames it for this view, for this query. Now that looks a little bit better, and I even have that label up there. In Microsoft Access, you spent ungodly amounts of time naming a field without spaces and then putting a caption on it with spaces. It's okay. Microsoft Access is a very powerful tool. It's a development tool. There are people who are Access programmers, because there's a language behind Access that uses macros, and there's a VB-like language that also supports it. And there's a lot of people whose database management system is Access. And it works for them. For me, the database is just the foundation of that GUI. There's still a GUI. I don't build forms in Access like you learned to do. I don't build reports in Access. It's not Access's job. Access is a database. SQL is a database. So the fact that these are capitalized kind of funky, and when my boss looks at it, says, why don't you put spaces in there? Can't you capitalize consistently? Sure I can. But I'm just showing you this. When I generate the report, all those get renamed anyways. This is in the database. Renaming a calculated field, that makes sense. Renaming any other field, unless it's really long and you don't understand it, I don't normally do it. I will rename it before it shows up on any report that a human's going to see, but I don't normally do it here. Joni?
Can you format the cost per day?
For what? Same answer. Why do I care about how these are capitalized up here? Because I might show it to my boss, and that's very professional looking. I'm not showing him this. And I'm not showing him this either. The answer to your question is yes. But I don't do it very often. Because in C#, I'll say, take that number with 6 decimal places, chop it off. In C#, in the GUI, I'm going to do that. Can we hear? Yes, I'll show you how, because the answer always comes up. But I love that. You fed right into me. I love giving you the answer. Who cares? It's gross. I don't care. At this stage, I don't care. I'm in the database. Database people dig around in databases, not supervisors. And if I'm the database person here and I want to show the results of this to my supervisor, I'm probably going to run that through a program to pretty it up and give me a report with nice column headers and all that kind of stuff, formatted numbers. So I'm sorry, I had fun being flippant, but I hope you know I didn't mean it. But remember where we are. We're in the database. Not meant for human consumption. Only database people should be in here, not humans. So we can put an alias in there. What if I want to filter this list? I want to see people who are, look at this guy, $800 a day. Ouch. I want to see who's spending big bucks. Well, that means let's filter the people who are only spending 11, 15, or $53 a day. We'll just leave them alone. We don't need to pester them. But I want anybody, what does it say? I think over 200. So that's a where clause, right? Can we add a where clause? Sure. Where what, though? Where the cost per day is greater than 200. You happy with that? Better not be. Go. Didn't get any squiggles, which is surprising. But when I run it, it says unknown column, cost per day. What do you mean? It's right there. It's your first, I don't know if it's the first, but one of many little nuances in SQL. You cannot use an alias in a where clause. Because of the way this is processed, that new name has not yet been created. And so you cannot use an alias cost per day in the where clause. So what do? You have to repeat the formula. Ooh. Ouch. Imagine again the big, huge monster formula, 15 sets of parentheses. Ugh. But that's kind of what you got to do. There are alternatives. Right, we'll learn about those later. But for right now, this is the easy answer. You just steal the equation. And it goes, oh, That's what you want. Val, what's wrong with that? It's not sorted. Okay, so let's make Val happy in my purpose in life this week. I want to sort that. Order by. Again, the way this works, here's another little nuance. You can use cost per day in an order by clause. Because the order by clause gets processed after the results are generated and then they're resorted. At that point, there is a cost per day column. Isaac's not happy, but we're going to get him a job at mysql.dev and he can rewrite the new version. And I think I want to go descending. So who are the really bad people here? $900 per day. I probably want to know who was that, right? So no problem. Employee number, who the heck is that? Oh, look, that's consistent. The top two, same guy, excuse me. Uh-oh, let's go, who is that? Oh, it's the CEO. Never mind. His lunch probably cost that much, and if he was entertaining. But that's the kind of questions you can ask. And I love these. We're gone for one day, and we spent $1,000 on expenses. If it's not the CEO or if it's not somebody big, or even if it is, I might want to say, what did you do? It cost $1,000 in one day. Who knows? Maybe they went to a trade show and they had to pay the registration fee. I don't know. But at least we got a question window now. This is guiding me in my questions here, right? I now have information that can help me seek out other information. Stop eating at that restaurant. And by the way, you owe us $500. If that's the case, I don't know. Ordered by cost, so we did all these. So one thing to keep in the back of your mind, it probably says it down here just a little bit later. Calculations can be used in comparisons. Somewhere it says don't use them in the where clause. Where is that? Renaming. So there's the alias stuff. There we go. Cannot use a calculated field like city, state, zip. It's a concatenation. We're going to see how to do that in just a second. Cannot use a calculated field in a where clause, but you may use it in an order by clause. You get used to it. So that's the basics. You just put the math in there. Order of precedence applies. Put the parentheses in there if you need to. And using advanced SQL skills that I'm not going to show you, you can actually create little procedures to do calculations, like methods. But I've never gone that far. I've never had anything that complicated to calculate from my database. Remember, I don't have to do it here either. I can send all this data to a business class who has all the rules, because why am I putting it in here? It's a rule, right? How do we calculate tax? I don't think I want that 0.055 in my database. I think I want it in my business class, so if the tax rate changes, I'm going here, not to the database. I'm still a big proponent of data belongs in a database, calculations and rules belong in a business class, and let the GUI make it pretty. Keep all that separate. That was the big plan. And we're deviating from that, and I don't know how much a good idea that is. I'm sure there's good reasons, people who are smarter than I am. But from our perspective, I think where we're at here, it's a good idea to keep the data in one place, the rules in another, and all the pretty it up GUI stuff in a third. Questions so far? Just like in most programming languages, we can do calculations with dates. Again, not sure I'd do it here, but we can. Boss wants a quick answer. You're sitting at your database terminal. Boss wants a quick answer. I can do that without having to write a program and a GUI and a business class. I can do some of this stuff, but it won't necessarily be pretty. If I want to do date math, there's add date. There's also a current date function, that's like today. So this will give you the current date, and then you can add, and when you do add date, it adds days. It's confusing. So if we wanted to here's my example. Calculate the return date. Okay. I want to select the trip date and the destination and the return date. Oh, wait a minute. I don't have that. It's calculated. Okay. The return date for a duration 1 trip, I just add 1 to that day? Not necessarily. But to calculate that, we're going to start with the trip date. So I'm going to do an add date to the trip date. Remember, when you do add date, the number that you put next is measured in days. If you want to measure something else, months, years, minutes, we have to use a different function. But for right now, it's in days. And I want to know when you came back, so that would be add the duration. But if it's a 1-day trip, does that mean I left today and came back today? Or does that mean I left today and I came back tomorrow? I'm going to have to ask whoever's in charge. If it's a 1-day trip, in my mind, you came back on the same day. I used to love those in the Air Force. Fly out at 6 o'clock in the morning to New Jersey, have the time of your life, and then be back by 9 p.m. Again, this is calculated. I can give it an alias as return date from TBL trips. And I'm not interested in any order buys or wheres. I'm playing around with date calculations here. And so here's a 2-6 come back. So I probably, just so I can check my math here, let's add the duration here as well. 6 days from that would be the 11th, is what this is telling me. 1 day from the 3rd is the 3rd. Again, if your business doesn't calculate it that way, then change the math. But you can do the math. It's relatively straightforward. Add date. MySQL includes a second function, or a second version of add date. By the way, there's a sub date as well to find out 30 days ago. That's what you need. But there's also an add date with an interval clause that allows you to change what we're measuring. Instead of days, could be weeks, could be months, could be years. So the second version of this would look like this. Add date, interval, duration, and then at the end here you put the type of duration that you want. And notice it's always singular, so it seems a little odd. I always want to put S's on those, but it's day, year, month, week. Those are the measurements. There's no plurals. And I should get the same kinds of answers. Looks like it. But if I want to, I can change this to weeks, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense here, but just to demonstrate. And now I'm out 6 weeks. That was a long trip. So it's a little cryptic. I always have to look it up. Date calculations, it's one of those things that is not standard across computer languages yet at all. Everybody has their own little ways of doing it. Including Swift. No, Swift doesn't even do it yet, does it? Reading date calculations. Still have to go back to the old language called Objective-C to do date calculations because they haven't got to that part yet in Swift. I hope they clean it up because it's ugly. But every language is a little different. That's why there's notes. That's why there's Google. That's why there's books. Yeah, Google. If you got a 400-page book on C#, how do you find date calculations in there? By the time you get the book off your shelf and have found it in the index and leafed through it, I'm already moved on and processing. Google's got most of these answers. Even my notes. Tough to figure out which unit that was in. Only reason I like my notes better, because at least I know I explained it the way I understand it. That may not help you very much. Okay, so here's some more examples. Add 14 days, add 18 months. And here's a different technique. This is for the new versions of SQL. We can say, here's one date, and you just do a plus interval. You can skip the add date stuff and just add. I'm guessing you could probably subtract. We'll try it. Okay. So maybe this makes a little more sense. The trip date plus an interval of duration minus 1 weeks. Same answer. Can I subtract a week? Yep. So that's even a little easier. But if you use the minus thing, I don't think we can say, well, you know what, let's try this. Let's try trip date plus 2. Or just plus duration. Oh, would that be cool? Oh. Did it work? It did, but this is interesting. Look at the format. That's 6 days ahead. That one's not. Oh, it's 8 days ahead, so that's right. But look at the format. What happened? Got to go ask the SQL programmers. I have no clue why they did that. But what's cool is I can do it. And as an experienced programmer, that's not my first instinct. You can just add a number to days and it'll work. It does do days. Okay. My first instinct that says it's got to be harder than that. Maybe by the time you get to be experienced programmers, you'll go, just add 4. That'll work. Should work in all languages. If it doesn't, get a new language. But it worked here. One of the most common types of calculated fields is concatenation. My first instinct is to always use a plus or an ampersand. Plus sign for C#, ampersand for many of the other languages. To concatenate 2 strings together, none of them work. At least not the last time I checked. And since my SQL changes and there's new additions all the time, let's see if anything's changed. Select, do I have first name and last name? Yep. First name plus last name from TVL employees. Just a quick check, see if the language has changed any. Not exactly. So nope, not yet. To concatenate in SQL, you must use the concat function. Now, for once, I feel right saying the word function because I'm pretty sure that's what they're called in MySQL. They're not methods, they're functions. So you have to use the concat function, and it's pretty easy to use. Inside the parentheses, you simply list the things that you want stuck together, as many of them as you want. So if I want the first name, comma, last name, that'll work. But it'll do that smushy thing, right? Smush them all up. So if I want a space in between, fine. Put a space in between. And you can list as many things as you want here. I think a little later we'll do city, state, zip. No, I don't have that here. Right. But if you wanted to do city, state, zip, you say concat, city, comma, and then quotes, comma, space, comma, state, comma, a space, comma, so on. You just keep concatenating as many items as you want inside those parentheses to make a big, long concatenated string. That's a calculated field, so you get the ugly formula up there, but you can give it an alias. I just realized we were reviewing alias, aren't we? So programming logic beginning, we did that on Tuesday for those of you in that class. Did aliases. We were doing our lookup table. Changed the name. We did concatenation there, but we did it with plus signs. How'd we do that? Why doesn't it work here? That's access. This is SQL. Someday there'll only be one language and we'll all hate it. But there'll only be one, which will be much better. Did that work? Yes. All it did is change the column heading. That's all it did.
Those would be employees, not customers, right?
Who cares? Yeah, thank you. It's good to have one person in the room who's not taking programming logic intermediate to remind me that I'm not in programming logic intermediate. Thank you. You can rename it whatever you want. EMPS, capital E if you wish. Knock yourself out. It's just a column heading. However, it's not just a column heading. If I create this SQL string in PHP, in the XSD and C#, you listen to the languages that you and I are speaking right now? I feel a little sorry for Kathy because some of the stuff she hasn't quite hit yet. But listen to the way we're talking and you're going, yeah, I know it. SQL, C#, the XSD thing, and take yourself back to last August. If I'd talked that way, you would have walked out and said, I'm not doing this program. No way. I'll never understand him. But you're already doing it. We're concatenating stuff. We're instantiating things. Holy cow. You've come a long way already. Unfortunately, there's a long way to go. I'm still learning. Questions about concatenation? The painful thing is it's a calculated field. So if you want to do a where clause where the name is greater than Smith because I want everybody at the back end of the alphabet to assign to this person, you got to repeat that formula in the where clause. If I want to sort, this is a stupid name, it's one employee. If I want to sort, that's easy. What if I want to sort by last name? Oh, that's a good question. What's next in my notes here? There's the city, state, zip. I could have visualized it for you. We talked about renaming, can't use calculated fields, and then, oh, Joni wants to see this. Formatting results. There it is. Not hard. Format, whatever the name of the field is, how many decimal places you want. So real quick before I have you answer that other question. All right, here's my cost per day. If I want to pretty that up, let's remember what it looks like. There's my cost per day. Joni's gagging, so we got to fix that. It's almost as bad as not sorting. Format, cost per day with 2 decimal places. No? Order by. Come on. This needs to be formatted. The format comes in the field list. So here's my calculation. When you're done calculating, format that with 2 decimal places. Like C#, it will round. So here's where the calculation is happening. That's where you format it, because that's what causes this to appear. Better? Can I get commas in there? I haven't found that one yet. It's probably there. If you go digging into the MySQL site, you could probably add commas to them. I haven't found it yet. So that's one formatting. If you want to format dates, then you do date format. I always want to do format date, but it's date underscore format. And then a format string using %m, %d, %y, and then there's a whole bunch more you can go look up. So you can rearrange these in different orders. We can format dates.
Can you use that format date when you added the dates?
Yes, I'm sure I could have.
The two.
So I still have it handy here. Trip date, concatenate. What did I do with it? Oh, there it is. So here's where I added it, and I got that funky return, remember, without the dashes. So I should be able to do a date underscore format, or was it format underscore date? Oh, I got it right that time. Parentheses. Close parentheses. And inside here, my format. In quotes, or apostrophes. Let's do a %y dash %m dash %d capital Y. Really? And it'll give you different, I think you get a 2-digit year with a little y, so yes, it matters. Magic. What happened to this one? Wow. Is it complaining because it crossed over the month? Looks like it. That one's got zeros. This one doesn't have a duration. Looks like every time it wants to cross the month, it's adding 6 days to that. It's getting the 31st of February going, That's what I'm seeing here. So yeah, this works, but no, not really. So what happens if I say plus interval? I thought that worked. Plus interval duration day. Fixed it. The only nulls I'm getting, there's one. Oh, it's because it's got 0 days. For some reason, a trip date's 0. It's got some bad data in there. Probably should be null. This probably got stored by access again as zeros. I want the trip date to be null. I don't know what I'm going. Maybe this is a future one, but I want to log the trip. Not a real great idea because that's the primary key. But, so the plus, it worked, but not all that well. I'm going to try one more thing. This should really mess it up, right? If it couldn't handle adding 6 to stuff, now I'm adding 30. I should get a whole bunch of nulls here. Yep. So that confirms my suspicion. It adds, but if you hit the end of the month, it's done. So that's not a good idea yet. It only works as long as you're not hitting the end of the month. So make sure it's in recording plus interval duration day. That's probably the best solution. All right, as an exercise in the last 5 minutes here, I'm going to end the recording. So those of you who aren't here, hope you can come up with this. And you can resize these columns and look like, yeah, I do need to, a couple, you just drag them. What I want you to work on for 5 minutes or maybe a little longer if it takes you that, is I want this result, a net triple, but I want them sorted by last name then first name. So I want them displayed first name, last name, but I want them sorted last name, first name. Make it happen. If you get stuck, ask me for help.